Lilo and Stitch tells a sweet and sentimental tale of a lonely Hawaiian girl and a fugitive alien that help mend a broken family. Hello and welcome, Cinema, where we focus on the film. I'm Josh, this is Simply Cinema. Let me know down in the comments below what you thought of Lilo and Stitch. Was it good? Was it bad? Or somewhere right in the middle? Or if you're waiting for this review to decide if you're going to see it or not, let me know all your thoughts. Be respectful in the comments below, keeping it spoiler free, but taking it right in and positive. Generally, this is a film that you're bound to compare what you're looking from the original to this, whether you were born in that generation like I was, being able to watch the original and enjoy it for the lighthearted animation that is colorful and vibrant. This one is live action, but it does manage all the new nuances to making it a new original story while also mimicking some of the aspects that make the original so good. Aspects of the ohana, the thematic elements that really makes the story sweet and sentimental. And Dean Fleischer Camp, who is the director of Marcel the Shell with Shoes On, directed this one, and you see the threads to that film within this, which is all the best notes that you could really ask for it, tackling family, tackling the sentimental ideas that this film bleeds out. And so while you're tackling these various ideas that really just do a lot to the vibrant colors of the set, the variables to the CGI, that looks really well complete. The different aliens throughout just look like their counterparts as they need to, but the story itself, while I do have some minor complaints about the original feeling rushed, despite being good at the same time, there's variables to this one that answers and resolves some of the questions, that does all the little nuances to filling in some gaps, making it feel a little bit more taking its time and being able to fill in some areas that really give some answers, giving Mr. Bubbles an area where he has reason to be undercover as a social worker. So you get this new social worker who is actually the actor of Nani from the original animated features. So it's a nice tie-in what we get from Tia coming in for this role, and we just get some lighthearted performances as well, what we get out of Lilo, and then Chris Sanders returning for the voice of Stitch, that just brings the same element that you expect, that he's a troublemaking one designed to destroy things, and you just get that revolvement of the arc of his character, and also the things where you have to mend a social home, the elements where they're tackling ideas of the loss of family members, and they mention the parents more than a few times within this one, unlike the original, which didn't take away from the original, but the way they add that into this one just adds in those cute little elements that really adds to touching emotional moments, that while there is the redundant jokes here and there, the way they go about certain aspects, making a family fun film, giving a few gags here and there that don't feel too far-fetched or too out of left field to what you're paying attention to, the way you're adding all these dramatic moments, the moments that are down to earth, touching on elements of family, on elements of loss and care for a sister taking care of a sister, that's just dealing so well with all the right notes in the way it's tackling all the ideas that it's covering as a whole, that really manages to cover all the tracks well, check off the check boxes of what it needs to tackle from the original, but also keeping it to be its own original film. And there's things where Billy McNewson and Zach Galifianakis make a good pair as the two comic relief characters within this role, and they do sort of alter what ultimately comes out of the story, because we're not getting the main villain of what we see in the original, and so they tweak some things along the way, But at the same time, that speeds up aspects of the exposition that really don't need to be replayed in full, and elements here and there throughout the story. I love touching in on certain remarks of the film, copying the dialogue word for word in the right places that it needs to, but still creating some new elements, some new scenes that add a different set of a flair that new generations will be able to watch this, whether right after the original or this being their first exposure to the story as a whole, and new generations will be able to enjoy it for the sentiment that still manages to bleed on, whether that is a better quality story or if it does just pay too much homage to the original. Either way, it does have some sweet remarks to where you're tackling, how you're covering the story as a whole, that becomes something that's really compelling to the nature of where you're following along with all the different flavors that this film manages to express. And despite this being a good deal longer than the first original, this still does touch on some new beats, some new story elements, and goes and covers elements that you've seen before in a way that feels like it really did deserve some new runtime, especially in the areas where I said it fills in some gaps, makes it feel more gradual with its pacing, more sentimental with the way it's trying to drag the story out, but not in a way that's forceful with how they're just trying to delay certain scenes just to make it a longer film. It feels intentional with the writing, the way they're playing things out, and adding in those new elements certainly do its own favor for what they're trying to express with this new film. And taking it into the mix elements, fans of the original will be bound to compare what's going on with the original versus the remake. Just huge comparisons to what's going on. There's certain things that are copied time for time, but not necessarily everything. There's small alterations throughout, shortened scenes, and also added scenes that are put in different placements throughout. It's not necessarily a good or bad thing, so I'm putting it in the mix because it will be a turnoff to some people, but it could be a win for others that are watching this for the first time or weren't necessarily the biggest fan of the original. It's just an alteration where certain things could bother you or not, and that's just where certain things about the added villain or the lack of the original villain will be a weird thing here and there. Because me personally, well, I thought the main villain had its own sense of comic belief and destroyer as the player to that original movie. There's something about the absence of him that didn't necessarily need him for most of this film, that I was fine with the absence of him. Certain alterations, I'll talk more about the negatives, but as it is, there's certain things with the cast that do its own favor. Now, there can get a lot more expression out of the animation that you get in the original that you can't replicate within reality, but there's still a sentiment to what they're doing with the themes that, even though they're a little bit diminished, it doesn't necessarily take away from the general idea that the original film was trying to express. And taking out comparison, looking at this as its own thing, it does still handle the story with the same expressions, with the same light that new generations can explore. And me, as someone that enjoys remakes still for their own respect and artists replicating what they originally loved, is something that I still enjoy this for all the same, because I'm not necessarily going to disregard it just because it's trying to replicate what we originally had, because they still choose to add their own flavors to the writing, to certain added scenes, to what they thought could be done different, even if it doesn't need to be different. So there's some remarks to where some people will feel it's completely unnecessary because it has some same replications, but at the same time, it's something to be open-minded about. Enjoy what they're replicating into live action. Whether you end up enjoying it or not is still going to be under your opinion, but that's still an opinion we can all express because art is in that favor as art. Which takes me into the negatives. There's an aspect of the third act where, though I loved and enjoyed quite a bit of the first two acts, even though it wasn't fully as expressive or quick as what we've gotten before, the act of the villain, I made a mention to that not being a bother when he was absent from the first two acts. It sort of speeds the film along and focuses in developing other characters well, but the lack of the villain as the main villain in the third caused some sacrifices to be made to a lovable character that I enjoyed from the original, that they alter some of his characterization within this one, that I won't get spoilers to who it is, that ultimately changes how the ending goes and leads into a certain idea and act in the film, that the final saving part of the scene is something that is really odd, really weird about this certain scene where someone's holding their breath for a really long time, and it really takes away the reality of time underwater versus what the scene actually looks like in real life, which really suspended the belief to the extent where I wasn't a huge fan. I was just really taken out of the moment that they were really building upon the sweet and sentimental aspects of this film. While it does have those moments, this certainly carried itself in a favor that didn't necessarily always hit all the right beats. It skipped over certain treads to which made the original so well in its development, that was also quick with its development. And while this had some favors that were good in the way that it took its time to develop some characters, there were some added characters, certain other things that felt like they could have been left out or could have added and developed themselves a little bit more. Getting a new neighbor that helped out still left out certain things that we could have gotten a little bit more if we're developing that aspect of the film. Since we're adding it, even though they had a little bit of a purpose, it would have helped a little bit more to give them that much more substance to what you're developing for this film as a whole, that leaves certain remarks where certain jokes are not necessarily as prevalent within this film as much as others. It's sort of a hit and gag sort of comedy here and there, which did work effectively, especially within the first two acts, but not necessarily in the way that I love the original for. And that goes back into the sake of comparison. For me, being a biased fan of the original, this one certainly had certain aspects that I enjoyed still, but of course, it's going to fall into some of the umbrella of just not necessarily being able to fully embrace what this film is fully trying to go after. So that's just my personal review for Lilo and Stitch, which I have to rate a simply 7 out of 10. Let me know down in the comments below what you thought of the live action Lilo and Stitch. Was it good? Was it bad? Or somewhere right in the middle? Are you a fan of the original? Or are you not? Let me know all your thoughts, what you're going into this film as, and I'll be having a Lilo and Stitch full film ranking coming out fairly soon on this channel, so make sure to like this video if you enjoy it, subscribe if you haven't already, to join in film culture community where we talk about the love of cinema as a whole. So that's just all, and make sure to do yourself a favor and go watch a movie.